you look at pretty much any community project around Gig Harbor, there's a really good chance Rotary had a hand in it at some point. So thank you all for what you do for Tacoma. So a little bit about me, since Jason was so unkind to be not be here in my introduction. Like I said, my name is Derek Young. I grew up in Gig Harbor. I always joke that Gig Harbor is my town, Tacoma is my city. We ended up, oftentimes, especially being on the South Peninsula, the North End was kind of my playground and where a lot of my friends live. So I'm long-time Tacoma adjacent. Otherwise known as the North End. Like I said, spent 16 years on the city council and took a year off when I ran for Pierce County Council. And my district represents Ruston, the entire town, the North End and the West End of Tacoma, the peninsulas and islands. So I think I get the chance to serve one of the more interesting districts because I have some of the most urban areas, some of the most rural areas, and kind of everything in between. So my district really represents a lot. One thing I want to emphasize, though, is that even though we're districted and those are my voters who elect me, at the same time, I serve everyone in Pierce County. And we really do, or at least most of us really do try to emphasize that because as a county, we are very large. Counties nationally tend to not be as large as they are on the West Coast. I like when I go, I'm very active in our national association and I'm on our health policy committee and chair our behavioral health committee. So whenever I'm back at one of the conferences, I like to tease them and say, how tall is your county? And they give me a funny look and I say, well, mine goes from sea level to 14,000 feet. I've got a volcano. And if they're from the Midwest, that really freaks them out. They don't really know how to process that. So one thing I like to do when I'm in Tacoma speaking to groups is ask, does anybody know what county government does for you in the city?
No idea.
No, I see a former city manager around here, so you probably know. Frankly, it is always a little bit of a mystery. I'm a city resident myself on the other side, but the connection's a little deeper because Tacoma actually does a lot of the services that county government takes up. So it's not uncommon for us to have a little overlap. But here's the way I describe it is, there are state functions that are carried out at the local level that is county government's duty. So for example, you ever noticed in a crime drama where you're watching or maybe you've been in a trial and the prosecutor says, I'm here to represent the state. Okay, those are county employees that are doing that, but they're literally carrying out the state's justice functions on their behalf at the county level. The same for Superior Court judges. We elect them at the local level here in Pierce County. They're Pierce County employees, but they also are state officers, constitutional officers, half funded by the state. We also have to supply indigent defense on behalf of the state. In fact, Washington is at the bottom of all states nationwide in terms of how much they fund indigent defense. 4% of it's funded by the state. 96% of it is funded at the local level. So that's all done for you by the county, regardless of whether the person commits a crime in the city limits or outside. The felony system is entirely carried out on behalf of Tacoma citizens by the county. The other thing is that we carry out a lot of social services for the state at the local level. So human services, aging and disability populations, public health, all those are functions that often the state government and federal government for that matter pass through to the local level and we carry out at the county level. Now, there are some functions that are carried out by the city of Tacoma. The city of Tacoma is unique as a large metropolitan city. They often buy kind of extra services is the way I put it. So, for example, we call our health department the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. That's unusual in that we have a partnership with our major city. They sit with us, some of your Tacoma members sit with me on the board of the health department and basically buy extra services. And that's essentially what it is. But the reality is Tacoma can walk away from that anytime they want, and the responsibility ultimately lies with Pierce County. The same is true of human services. A lot of the human services are carried out by the county. If you drive by our human services department on Yakima Avenue, that's providing services to everyone in the county. But also a few are handled by the city of Tacoma, essentially doing a little extra. I also focus quite a bit on Land use and environmental. So this is where we do have some bifurcation, but there's regional responsibilities that we've got. So my committee that I chair on the Pierce County Council's Community Development, it basically handles parks, environment, land use. If it's green or grows or hops around, that's kind of what we do. And so that's pretty much everything outside of the city limits. You have your own council members, some of which I'm very close with. Ryan Miller, for example, we kind of work on similar issues. But we also have regional responsibilities. So within that, Ryan and I try to sort out how we're going to deal with growth. Last year, Pierce County was the fastest growing county in the entire country. And you're feeling it, right? I mean, I know my community, they're kind of getting annoyed with me because there's a lot of people moving to our area. But in sorting out that growth, we have to make sure that we send it to the right places. So we protect what we really love about this area. You know, we like to be able to go to the mountain and not watch miles and miles of sprawl headed out to it. We also want to build strong communities, and we can't do that unless Tacoma has a lot of the growth coming back to it. Where we once used to have this sprawl-style development, Tacoma needs to be able to know that we're not going to subsidize growth well outside the city limits and undermine its tax capacity. One of the reasons that you have high taxes in Tacoma is because for decades, really, the county was subsidizing growth outside of it. So you kind of had this hollowing out where in an unusual circumstance where you have large sections of downtown, for example, that don't have people living in it. And that's not acceptable to me. So that's something that we've been pushing back on. It's starting to change, but it takes time. And the other thing I wanted to talk with you about, and I know it's really important to people in Tacoma, is its behavioral health, the behavioral health crisis we've got going on right now. You see it impacted in a number of ways, in homelessness, in crime, and just people that are suffering, dropping out of the workforce. It's really, we've reached a level now where we're not only not treating people with mental health problems, but the opioid crisis has reached a level that we now describe in public health as an epidemic, just like any other disease. Last year, 65,000 people lost their lives because of the opioid epidemic. That's more than any other accidental death. And we actually are starting to figure out that number is probably well underestimated because of the way we measure mortality. In fact, in Pierce County, I got some, so in Pierce County, we found out just recently that the state thinks we're underestimating that by potentially as half, just half as much as the reality. So it's a serious crisis. Unfortunately, the county wasn't doing a lot for a number of years to respond to that. We're just now starting to make some significant investments that I'm proud of. This last year, in a supplemental budget, we made our first investments in behavioral health in over a decade. And I think that's a big step. This next budget, I think you'll see some additional investments. One of the things I'm really happy about is our new executive, Bruce Stanmeyer, is collaborating closely with the city of Tacoma on their response to homelessness. Unfortunately, we weren't able to pass the 0.1% of 1% tax that I'd sponsored. Tacoma's already stepped forward. It's another one of those cases where the county is not failing to do its job, and so Tacoma stepped up and did it. But unfortunately, we weren't able to achieve the supermajority that we require to pass it. That would help fund some of these behavioral health programs that we know we need. It's 22 counties around the state of the 39 counties have already passed it. But it's also 90% of the population is covered by that tax. 7% of what remains in Washington is Pierce County, outside the city of Tacoma. So it's a significant issue. I also want to point out, related to that opioid crisis, we formed a task force that I'm co-chairing with your council member Connor McCarthy that will begin meeting this Friday to develop an action plan. And hopefully by the first week of December, we'll have an action plan to actually take out to our communities and basically sell it and say, this is going to be our response. That task force is made up of people from law enforcement, from judicial services, human services, public health, and addiction specialists. And we're going to come up with a way to respond to this crisis that I think will be successful, but also is more more humane. I mean, in all reality, we know we're not going to incarcerate our way out of this problem. We need to treat it treated like the public health epidemic that it is. Troy Christensen is actually on the working group that's been at it for, I don't know, a few weeks now. A group of professionals in the industry that basically understand this crisis better than anyone else, and so we're going to take the work that they're already establishing and bring that to the task force and use that to inform us. So I think there's some exciting things going on the behavioral health front, and also at the state and national level. So I mentioned that I chair the behavioral health subcommittee for our national organization. We're working with Senator Cantwell right now, and she's working on drafting a bipartisan large funding bill. This is kind of exciting stuff because, as you may know, Congress isn't exactly known for getting stuff done these days. But the one thing that I think they can agree on is behavioral health. They actually passed the largest mental health bill in history last year, even kind of in the midst of the election that was tearing everyone apart. And we know that they recognize that opioids is a continuing crisis. So we're looking for a large funding bill, and that will help us at the local level. So I wanted to leave time for questions if there are any, and please feel free to ask kind of about anything. I dabble a little bit in at both at the county level, but also work with our legislature and the Congress, like I said, so I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.